So open, if you would, to Deuteronomy 32. We don't have a whole lot of text to cover tonight because I decided to wait, and instead of launching into Joshua, which I know on our syllabus it had us reading the first 5 chapters of Joshua, I'm going to let Joe do that, and so I've decided not to go there tonight. And I just want to finish out Deuteronomy, and I want to move pretty slowly through the last couple of chapters of Deuteronomy, because there are some expressions here that I think are really powerful and really beautiful expressions. And there are some ideas that I want us to think about as we come to the conclusion of Moses' life. So I want to start with a question that I don't want you to answer immediately. I'm going to put this question out there for you to think about, and I want to come back to this at the end of class. Hopefully you've had some time at that point to stew on it a little bit, and you'll have some things to offer as we close out our class tonight. Here's the question. What impresses you about Moses? What have you seen in Moses this quarter that maybe you had not seen before, and maybe you realized, wow, Moses had these qualities that I did not see before, or I did not see to this degree before, okay? There's a few things like that for me that I think will probably come out as we discuss that. I think you will have seen some of those things too. But what impresses you about Moses? Or maybe it's a story or an episode in the life of Moses that has new meaning for you now, or something. I was telling Joe earlier, it's not particular to the life of Moses, but it's been so good for me this quarter to go through the chronology of the Exodus. It's been a long time since I had done that, and I had forgotten just how long of a process this was. I know, yes, 40 years, but there's more to it than that, right? And there's a lot of events that happened that we've discussed this quarter. So I want to hear from you particularly about Moses, and maybe what you see in him that you hadn't seen before, or maybe it just made a deeper impression on you this time around. But let's start in chapter 32, and I want us to begin reading at verse 44. So this is after the Song of Moses that we discussed on Sunday has been written down. So Deuteronomy 32, verse 44. Moses came and spoke all the words of this song in the hearing of the people, he with Joshua the son of Nun. When Moses had finished speaking all these words to Israel, he said to them, "Take to your heart all the words with which I am warning you today, which you shall command your sons to observe carefully, even all the words of this law. For it is not an idle word for you. Indeed, it is your life. And by this word you will prolong your days in the land which you are about to cross the Jordan to possess." Okay, there are 3 things in those verses that stuck out to me that I want to make sure we emphasize. First of all, Moses says regarding all the things that he has taught them and the things that he has given them in this song of chapter 32, he says first, take this to heart. I want this to be important to you. I want you to see that these things that I am saying to you matter. And can I say to you, and I'm speaking for Joe on this as well, and I'm speaking on behalf of our elders too, every time you pick up your Bible, take these words to heart. This matters. These are the most important words that you and I will ever read. Take it to heart. Moses understood the importance of this. And so when Joe and I stand up to preach sermons and we say, get your Bible and open up to Deuteronomy 32, we want you to have an understanding of this. An understanding that we don't even have to say it. You know that this is right. Take this to heart. Moses, you hear him pleading with the people as he says this? I'm not going to be with you much longer. This is important. And I want you to know how important this is. It's so important. Secondly, he says in verse 46, command these things to your sons. Teach these things to your children. I want it to be in their hearts too. I want it to be important to you so that you will make it be important to them. Teach it to them that they may follow these words. And number 3, verse 47. This is no empty word for you, but these words are your very life. These words are your life. That's how important they are. I hope you remember what Jesus said in Matthew 4 and verse 4 when he quoted from Deuteronomy chapter 8, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. These words are your life, Moses says. I love those expressions. And I hear Moses in this voice that is just begging and pleading with these people. This matters. Take these words into your heart. Teach these words to your children. And know that these words are your very life itself. Beautiful expressions. All right. Let's go into chapter 33 now. Chapter 33 contains the record of the blessing that Moses pronounces on all of the tribes. And this is almost certainly the very last thing that Moses does before the nation. Before he goes up Mount Nebo, as he was instructed by God, to die atop that mountain. Before he does that, he pronounces these blessings on all of the people of Israel. And he does that by tribe. So in chapter 33, beginning at verse 6, he gives Reuben his blessing. Pretty short. Then in verse 7, Judah. Verse 8 down through verse 11, Levi gets one of the longest blessings, I think second only to Joseph. Verse 12, Benjamin. 13 through 17, there's Joseph's blessing. Verse 18, Zebulun. 20, Gad. 22 is Dan. 23 is Naphtali. 24 is Asher. So verses 6 through 24, the pronunciation of blessings on the 12 tribes. All right? Now, I'm not going to analyze those blessings. We're not going to go through and talk about those metaphors and things like that. But I simply want to make this observation with you. The last thing that Moses does to God's people is to pronounce a blessing. Here's an application point for us. No matter if you're speaking to a family member individually, maybe a spouse or a child, if you're speaking to friends or neighbors or coworkers, or if you're speaking publicly to a church or to a large group, maybe your company has some kind of event or something and you have the opportunity to speak to everybody, no matter who you're speaking to, no matter what the setting is, make sure that the last thing you say to that person is a blessing. In other words, don't part company with someone with things that are not blessings and positive, right? We don't want to part ways with somebody on bad terms. Depart on a blessing. Depart on good terms and friendly terms. I love that. Remember, these are the people who drove Moses to the point of anger that prompted him to disobey God, and that disobedience led to him not being able to go into the promised land. And yet he still pronounces a blessing on all of them. He doesn't stand up and as his final parting shot, "Oh, y'all are those terrible people that are keeping me out of the promised land." No, he blesses them instead. All right, just something for us to think about there. Now, chapter 33, verse 26. After the specific blessings are pronounced on all the tribes, I do want to look at the last 4 verses of chapter 33. I think there's some beautiful language here. There is no one like the God of Israel, who rides the heavens to your help, and through the skies in his majesty. He rides through the heavens to bring you help. Think about that. This is remarkable. You know, have you been watching the footage of the wildfires up at Table Rock? What have you seen riding through the heavens to give help? You see all those planes and those helicopters that are flying through the heavens as fast as they can to come to the aid of all of us. And don't you know that those firefighters who are on the ground, who are working in that intense heat and that environment, don't you know that when they see those choppers flying overhead carrying all of those thousands of gallons of water, that what they are seeing is their help flying across the skies? I love this expression that Moses gives. God will fly as fast as he can through the skies to come to your aid. Isn't that a beautiful thought? Now, I know it's figurative, right? God doesn't have to fly anywhere. I get that. But the imagery is powerful. Verse 27. The eternal God is your dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. The people of Israel have been journeying from the land of Egypt for over 40 years. And now that they are right on the brink of coming into the promised land, can I use this phrase? Their dwelling place. Moses says to them, you need to understand what your true dwelling place is. God is your dwelling place. Dwelling place means your home, the place wherein you dwell. Think about this idea. God is my home. Wherever He is, that is where I'm at home. That's where I dwell, because He is my dwelling place. And so Israel's dwelling place on earth is soon to be the land of Canaan. But what kind of a home is that if God is not among them? Isn't it better to be in the wilderness with God than to be in the promised land without Him? And isn't that the warning that Moses has been giving throughout the book of Deuteronomy? When you go into the land, don't forget about the Lord. When you go into the land, make sure you give credit to God for all the things that He's done for you. And if you turn to idols, and if you disobey, and if you turn away from the Lord, God will bring upon you all of the curses that you are about to bring onto the Canaanites. It's better to be with God than to be without Him. And if you turn away from Him, He will not dwell among you anymore. God is your dwelling place. It's not ultimately the land of Canaan. That's where you're dwelling now. And God will choose a place, and He will be with you. He will dwell among you, and all of that is unfolding in the Old Testament books still to come. But ultimately, Moses says, wherever God is, that's your home. I think that's a really beautiful thought. And we need to think about God in such a way that we associate Him with home. When I die, I'm going home. When I die, I'm going to be with God, and He is my home. He is where I want to dwell. Now, these things that I've said, don't those hit a little bit deeper, knowing that they're coming from the lips of a man who's 120 years old? You think he felt that so much deeper than what I'm saying right now. Moses felt this in a way that's much more real than what I can feel right now. One day when I have lots of gray hair, I have more now than I really wanted to admit, but when I have lots of gray hair and when I have a Moses beard, I think I'll feel these words even more deeply than I do now. But I love what Moses says. All right, verse 27 again. The eternal God is your dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. Right, we sing that song, leaning on the everlasting arms. What do those arms do? Verse 27, He thrust out the enemy before you, and He said, destroy. The arms of God are powerful. So much that they can drive out enemy nations. So much that they can forcefully remove God's enemies. But these are also the powerful arms of God. Go back to verse 26. Who come through the heavens to our aid. The same strong arms that drive out the evil nations are the same strong arms that are going to hold up and sustain God's people. Verse 28. So Israel lived in safety. Jacob lived alone in a land of grain and wine whose heavens dropped down dew. Happy are you, O Israel. For who else is like you, a people saved by the Lord, the shield of your help and the sword of your triumph? That's what God's everlasting arms do for His people. One of His arms holds a shield by which He covers and protects His people. His other arm bears a sword by which He fights our battles. What other nation on earth is there like you, Israel, whom God has saved? And your enemies will come fawning to you, and you shall tread upon their backs. That's just an idiomatic expression that means you're just going to dominate everybody because God is with you. All right? Now, think about this. 80 years old, at the burning bush, God says to Moses, I need you to return to Egypt and bring back my people. And among the excuses that Moses gives, he says, I'm not a very good speaker. Are you kidding me? These lyrics that we just read right here, folks, this is better than Bob Dylan. Moses is a fantastic speaker. The oratory in Deuteronomy is strikingly powerful. Yeah, Moses was a good speaker. Moses was very eloquent and articulate, and I just love this language. Okay, I've talked a lot. In fact, I'm the only one who's talked. So you guys got anything you want to add to some of these things I've been talking about?
Okay, one thing I'll add. I don't know when I did this, but I made a note in my Bible of 6 different characteristics of God that come out of these verses that you just went over. That basically reminds the Israelites of God and what He is and what He will do. And I've got them underlined. I'll read them.
Okay, please do.
Number one is he rides on the heavens and on the clouds
Yep.
to reach you.
Okay.
Number two, he is your refuge. Number three, he has everlasting arms. Number four, he will drive out your enemy before you. Number five, he is your shield and helper. And number six, glorious sword.
I love it.
6 characters.
That would make a great sermon, Wayne. You should put that together. I will give up the pulpit when you're ready. Just let me know. That's really good. And here's, maybe let's go a step further with all those things that we've just discussed and things you highlighted. Yes, all of those things have immediate application to the physical people of Israel, who literally have a land into which they are going, who literally have physical nations that they will be fighting against and driving out. And so yes, there is an immediate application to those things. But do not all of those characteristics and all of those qualities, do those not apply to us as well? We have spiritual battles that we are fighting, and God is helping us. He is there helping us as we fight those battles with that shield, with that sword. He is flying through the heavens to come to our aid when we call upon Him. All of those things that Moses says right here to the physical nation of Israel are true for the spiritual Israel as well. I just think it's astonishing. Okay, I saw another hand back toward the back. I thought, no, I don't want to call on him. I saw somebody. No. I did see somebody back here first, though. Ben, and then Kelly, and then Joe.
I think as to how Moses is, after all this time, putting up with them and blessing them in the end, I think he has become more and more Christ-like.
I agree with you.
More
Yes.
like God
Yes.
over his life, how to have mercy, and how to. I think he looks at these people as sort of. I don't know what he was thinking, but maybe he looks at them as his children as well. Like I love these people as my children, and I want to be graceful and merciful.
Good.
But perhaps he's becoming more like God in the ability to have mercy.
Yep. Very good. Kelly?
No, I was just thinking, yeah, of course he was making excuses at the beginning, but he has had 40 years of speaking to these people. So
Sure.
I would
Yes.
hope in 40 years he would grow in his speaking ability.
Yeah, after 40 years of preaching, I sure hope I'm better than I was when I started. Yes. But also 40 years of character development, right? And that goes to Ben's point. Okay? Joe?
You've already kind of hit on my points, but I would say this proves, you can still change when you're old. You can still grow. At 80 years old, Moses said, well, I can't speak well. I don't know if in part that was humility, or was it lack of confidence, or what was that exactly? I don't know. But over time, we see some changes with Moses. This next 40 years, Moses grows.
Yeah.
He
Good.
develops. And
Yeah.
so, I don't think we can get to a point where we can just say, well, I'm too old to change. Well, Moses
Good.
changed.
Yeah, that's good. And that's an idea I want to hit on a little bit later. And I don't want to give the impression, and I'm sorry if I did, that when Moses said at the burning bush, I'm not a good speaker, I don't think he was lying about that. I mean, he's been talking to sheep for 40 years, right? I would probably feel like I'm not a very good speaker either if the only response I ever got from my audience was, meh, right? Okay, Bryce, then Joe.
I was just thinking about the importance that Moses continually places on the Israelites teaching their children to follow God. And obviously, they don't do the best at that, as we can see throughout the rest of their history. But a couple things occurred to me. In his blessings he's given, he talks about Joseph. Not specifically Ephraim and Manasseh, although he does reference in the last verse or two of that blessing he gives. But also when we talked about
Good. Joe?
I have a thought, and I will try to articulate it makes sense. But as big of a person that Moses is in this story, and as pivotal as he is and God used him, I just keep thinking about how it's not about Moses in the sense of it's a chain. And so it's the nation of Israel. Even the generation he's speaking to not being the generation that he started with, it continues on, and he's going, and it continues on. And I think maybe a lesson to learn from that is we need to not necessarily put as much emphasis on ourselves and think about the continuation, whether it be Christ's kingdom or in this case the nation of Israel, especially like our children, the next generation, not pin so much on individuals and not get so caught up in one person and what they've done. Yeah, acknowledge their contributions and they're important in the chain, but as Moses is, he's so focused on, all right, what is the next group going to do? It's not that I'm leaving, y'all are in trouble, and I'm not going to be here to help you. It's
Yeah.
about the next generation. I think we should
Right.
be thinking about how can we build up after us, after we're gone.
Yeah.
Just be focused on it.
No, that's good. There are no big people or little people in the kingdom, right? Even Jesus said things like that even the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than those without, right? So there are no big or little people in the kingdom. Everybody has a role to play. All of us are a part of this generation, if I can use that term in an accommodative sense, that is working towards the things that God has in store for us. Yeah, that's good. All right?
Well, and to
Read.
that point, I'd be curious of your thoughts on, I read some people interpret verses 50 and 51 of chapter 32 to mean that Moses did not die of natural causes. Because it says, you're going up to the mountain to die because you broke faith with me. And so it's like, here Israel has made itself to the doorstep. It's time to enter. You don't get to go. Are we going to wait for you to die naturally? Or are we going to do what I'm going to do for Israel? So Moses, here we go. And I don't know.
It's time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as the actual death of Moses, how did it happen? You know, if you could do an autopsy on the body of Moses, which you can't because nobody knows where God buried it, but if you could, right, what would the cause of death be revealed at? I don't know. But there are multiple times in Scripture where there's a character that we consider to be a critical player in God's game of chess, and he dies suddenly or in his prime, right? John the Baptist is a great example of that. Or maybe James the apostle in Acts 12. Why does God let him die? He's an apostle. The church is just now in its infant stages. Why does God take an apostle, right? I don't know the answer to that. Other than he accomplished what God needed him to accomplish, and it was done. God made that decision. So how exactly does Moses die? I don't know. But God takes care of that somehow. Moses' job was finished, and it's time for the people to move on. I don't think that answers your question, but it agrees with your question, if you can agree with the question. Okay. All right, let's go to chapter 34. Todd, go ahead.
Just one other thing. Looking at verse 29.
Of
In,
what chapter?
33.
33, okay.
Yes, we're at 33. I've been reading this, and this has stuck out to me so much. The Christian Standard Bible translates that verse. How happy you are, Israel. Who is like you, a people saved by the Lord? And I see such a powerful lesson for us. I love that translation using the word happy in that. You know, because if you look, one of the descriptive definitions of the word blessed is happily favored. You know, God favored these people. He saved these people. What a lesson for us as saved people. That is why they were happy. That's why they should have been happy. God saved them physically then, but what has he done for us spiritually?
Yeah, good. Yeah, the ESV renders it the same way, using that word happy, and conveying that sense of joy. That's good. All right, let's go to chapter 34. Nope, I'm sorry. I should look at my slides. 32, 48 to 52, and Reed took us there with his comment just a moment ago. Oh, wow, man. Okay, you guys have been talking too much tonight. All right, verse 49, the Lord says to Moses, go up to this mountain, Mount Nebo. You're going to survey the land which I'm giving to the sons of Israel. Then verse 50, then die on the mountain where you ascend and be gathered to your people, as Aaron your brother died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his people. And then this is what Reed mentioned, where God says, and this is why this is happening, because you broke faith with me and disobeyed. Now, I was thinking about this today, and I don't know what to do with this, only besides it just being an interesting thought exercise, okay? Moses pronounces the blessing on the people, chapter 33. And now he is going, as he stands at the base of the mountain, he's about to walk up to the top of this mountain, knowing that when he gets up there, he'll get to look around, but at the top of the mountain, he's going to die. Now, Reed, this may go back to your point a little bit more. If you look at chapter 34, and if you look at verse 7, Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was not dim, nor was his vigor abated. He climbed a mountain, right? This was not somebody who was decrepit in his life for the past 5-6 years, and we all knew it was just a matter of time. He climbs a mountain. And he's got energy, and he's got life in his eyes, right? And he dies at the top of the mountain. So God presumably takes his life in some way, right? Okay, Thane's got the solution.
Oh, no, not at all.
No, okay. All right, what you got?
I just find it ridiculous. I found it really interesting that Moses is on this mountain, presumably writing as he's seeing all of this stuff, get this kind of survey view of the land as he sees it. And he names lands by the tribe of Israel before they've even gone in and taken over the land. It's just, it might just be him just in faith anticipating God's victory over the Canaanites.
What?
He's already divided up the land.
So somebody brought this up last week, and I don't remember who it was, but it was Donna. It was Donna Holden. She and I were talking about this. There is really compelling evidence to suggest that Moses did not write chapter 34, that was written by somebody else later. Probably Joshua, but maybe even somebody else, which would have been after the allotment. Okay? All right. Now, how do you think Moses feels? What's he thinking when he knows, when I get to the top of that mountain, I'm going to die up there? Now, I think there's a part of me that would say, man, I think that might be the slowest walk up the mountain I ever took, right? Take my time. I'm going to enjoy every little incremental step, right? I'm not so sure that that's what Moses was thinking at all. No, he doesn't get to go to the promised land, but what is on the other side for Moses? Home, right? The dwelling place with God. That's what Moses knows is on the other side. I don't want to say he was just sprinting up the mountain, but I don't know that he was sad and forlorn as he was going up the mountain either. Okay, Joe?
I think he just felt relief because he's already several times.
It's over. 40 years is a long time.
God, multiple times, just take me, I'm done.
Yeah.
But I was just saying, I think it's interesting that he starts this on a mountain and ends it on a mountain. It's kind of like the bookends with the.
I love it. Starts at Mount Sinai and ends here at Mount Nebo. Yeah, that's really good. Okay. I want to go back to my question that I started with. What has struck you about Moses as we've gone throughout his life and the story of Israel this quarter? All right, talk. Matt?
The end of this chapter, it says, verse 10, since that time no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. It talks about his first thing it says is whom the Lord knew face to face. And in Numbers 12, this is my favorite parts about Moses, talking about he was a very humble, more than any man on the earth. But it said, God says, if there's a prophet among you, typically I show myself in a vision. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my household. With him I speak mouth to mouth, even openly, and not in dark sayings. And he beholds the form of the Lord. So you think about going up the mountain. He's been up the mountain with God so many times.
Yeah.
Why was he never afraid to go up with God on the mountain? And all the people stayed beside because they knew each other. And I think that's really awesome.
I love it. That's really good. Okay, let's get a couple more. I know we're out of time. Make them quick. Okay, that's good too. All right, Todd.
The boldness he had on multiple times.
Yep.
When he would go to God and say, don't do away with these people, even though you said you're going to.
Right.
But that shows the depth of his relationship and love for God, but also for these people.
Good. Okay, all right, that's great. I'm going to make this one comment, one application, and then I'll let you go. This goes back to something Joe was talking about earlier. You can change later in life. Moses' final 1/3 of his life, right? 40 years he left Egypt, 80 years at Mount Sinai, and then 40 years leading the people. His final third. Some of our most fruitful years for the Lord may come when our hair is gray. And I know that's not the way we typically think. Well, I'm not the young person I used to be. Well, I'm not as strong as I used to be. That may be true. But the Bible has a lot of characters who did great, incredible things for the Lord in what we consider to be old age. Okay? All right. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday.